Mr. Chancellor, Donald Yeomans began his 30-year career in Canada's public service in 1962. Over 3 decades, he served his country with distinction and demonstrated enormous leadership, acting as a senior advisor to the Privy Council, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury Board, Assistant Deputy Minister of both Health and Welfare and Supply and Service, and as Special Advisor with the National Judicial Institute. Indeed, this remarkable man made history during his time as Commissioner of Corrections when he appointed Mary Dawson as the first female warden of an all-male facility. Over the years, Mr. Yeomans has been recognized numerous times for his commitment and service, including the 1967 Centennial Medal, the 1977 Queen Elizabeth II Silver Jubilee Medal, and the 2000 Exemplary Service Medal for Corrections. Throughout his distinguished career and after his retirement in 1990, Mr. Yeomans devoted countless hours to his community, giving his time and his energy to organizations like the United Way, the Red Cross, the United Church, the YMYWCA, and the Federal Superannuates National Association. Donald Yeomans has also been a steadfast and loyal friend of Carleton University since he joined our Board of Governors in 1980. Mr. Yeomans served our institution for 13 years as a board member, sitting on various committees and acting as chair of the board from 1989 to 1991. He also sat as a member of the President's Commission on Carleton's second half-century, on the University Senate, and as a member of the board of the Carleton University Development Corporation. In the year 2000, our good friend was bestowed with the Founders Award, Carleton's highest non-academic honor, for his leadership and exceptional commitment to the advancement of the university. Mr. Yeomans is a man who believes in the value of education, of leadership, and of community service. As a wonderful tribute to his dedication to our institution, Mr. Yeomans' family and friends established the Donald R. Yeomans Bursary in 2006 to help students who display a commitment to these qualities pursue a quality education at our capital university. What a tremendous friend of Carleton, what a wonderful legacy. Mr. Chancellor, in recognition of outstanding contributions to Carleton University and his distinguished career of public service in the Canadian federal government, I request that you confer the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa upon Donald Yeomans.
By virtue of my authority, I confer upon you the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa. Congratulations.
Mr. Chancellor, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman of the Board of Governors, members of the faculty, fellow graduates, and guests. Thank you for inviting me here this afternoon. I thank most sincerely the Senate and the members of the Carleton community for granting me such a great honor. And I want to thank my family for their support of Carleton University. Frankly, I was surprised that I was chosen to receive this honor, considering the many distinguished and qualified Canadians who could be chosen. Life is full of surprises. Your lives will be full of surprises too. And I hope that your surprises will be as pleasant and rewarding as mine. I was surprised in 1960 when I was invited to come to Ottawa and work for the Royal Commission on Government Organization. My next surprise came when I was asked to go to work in the Privy Council office on implementing the Commission recommendations. And I'm surprised that I stayed here for 30 years in the public service. I was surprised and honored to be invited to serve on the Board of Governors of this great university almost 30 years ago. And I was surprised during my interesting public service career to become Commissioner of Corrections. It was that appointment and the things that I learned at the Correctional Service of Canada that I would like to talk about today. My 8 years with the Correctional Service of Canada had a profound influence on me, even though it was a relatively short part of my public service career. The public servants working in corrections are a wonderful group of people. My wife Kay has said on many occasions that the people that she met in corrections were amongst the most loving and caring group that she had the pleasure of knowing. From my 8 years in corrections comes my plea to you today. I ask you to go forth as young, well-educated Canadians and help create a criminal justice system of which we can all be proud. Carleton is a great university in part because it is a pioneer in the field of criminal justice. You know from your studies about the work of Professor Don Andrews and his criminogenic factors, work that is known and applied all over the world. You know that today clinicians and researchers who understand the treatment literature are creating treatment programs that are cognitive in design and delivery, and these programs are producing exciting results. You will be aware that these effective research-based programs were not available 20 years ago. Today they exist thanks to people like Carleton's Don Andrews and his colleagues. There's also the imaginative work of the Correctional Service of Canada's research team. For years, it has compiled and maintained a huge computer database that contains extensive details of all the offenders that have passed through Correctional Service of Canada. This database is a goldmine for researchers who are striving to develop research-based prison programs that work. You know from your studies that there's plenty of evidence that incarceration is not always the best solution for crime. The most dramatic use of the examples of incarceration come from our neighbor to the south. Our American friends now have 2.3 million people incarcerated. The United States leads the world in incarceration. For every 100,000 people, the United States incarcerates 714. The figure for Canada is 108. If incarceration is the answer, the United States would be the safest country in the world. From your studies, you're likely aware that California, which has a population about the same size as Canada, has in its state prisons, county jails, and federal penitentiaries 257,000 inmates, compared to the comparable figure for Canada is 34,000. California is moving at this moment on a $14.7 billion plan to expand its prison capacity and upgrade prison health care. This has prompted huge proposed cuts in spending on education and health care in the state. California is not alone. Michigan spends more on corrections than it does on education. The Corrections Department in Michigan consumes 20% of the state's general fund and employs nearly 1 out of every 3 state workers. But it's not all bad news south of the border. New York State is beginning to move away from mandatory sentencing for nonviolent drug and property crimes. It's moving toward alternative sentencing and expanded drug and mental health treatment. New York is also supporting early release for good behavior. The result? New York State is closing prisons. I cite these American figures to urge you people, as informed Canadians, to keep alert and not let Canada start down the same slippery slope. As an aside, I must stress that our American neighbors working in corrections struggle to operate their prisons professionally. The Commission on Accreditation for Corrections, an organization that was pioneered by a Canadian, John Braithwaite, has an excellent set of results-based standards that are assessed by independent auditors. Unfortunately, American prisons that are starved for resources struggle to meet those standards. I wish we had a system of independent accreditation for prisons here in Canada. Perhaps this is a cause that some of you can take up in your future. You are well aware from your studies of the alternatives to incarceration. The wonderful book by Rupert Ross called Dancing with a Ghost taught me about Aboriginal healing circles, the importance of matching the punishment to the crime, healing the harm, and returning a healed offender to the community. The healing for the offender is rehabilitation and reintegration. That's what we should be striving for. Our Ottawa Police Chief, Vern White, is well known for his support of restorative justice, a topic that you will have studied here at Carleton. It's well established that using knowledge of the offender and the victim brings better results than our traditional solutions. But Chief White says that he must constantly defend his views on this more successful policy. You know from your studies here at Carleton that early intervention and prevention is by far the most effective way to reduce crime. We're trying to make Canada a safer place, but often we go about it backwards. It's the old issue of supply and demand. During the famous days of Prohibition, the American government decided that the consumption of alcohol should be prohibited. So they made the production and distribution illegal. They tried to stop the supply. We know what happened. A huge rise in crime. Criminals produced and delivered alcohol to supply the demand. Currently, billions are being spent to control the supply of drugs from Latin America and other places. The demand is still being met. If it's impossible to keep drugs out of a penitentiary surrounded by a high barbed wire fence, how can we reasonably expect to keep drugs out of the North American continent? We must work on reducing the demand. A more successful story is the recent Canadian experience with cigarettes. Initially, we tried the traditional approach: control the supply by raising prices and limiting the distribution. What happened? A dramatic increase in the criminal distribution of cigarettes. Now we are taking an approach that's working. Reduce the demand, educate the people, explain the implications of smoking. It's slower, but it's working. The many parents in this audience will attest to the dramatic reduction in the use of cigarettes in Canada. This is a good example of the importance of public education. Another example is the impact of education about drunk driving, led by MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It's brought about a very dramatic reduction in alcohol-related fatal crashes. But you're aware that there is no question that incarceration is required for some offenders. The challenge is to make good use of it. A recent panel appointed by the federal government noted that for offenders in federal penitentiaries, and these figures are very recent, 60% have histories of violence, 80% arrive with serious substance abuse problems. 12% of men and 26% of women have very serious mental health problems. 70% have unstable work histories, have not completed high school, nor have a trade or any special skills. Think of the impact of those figures. Think of the need for mental health treatment, the need for drug abuse treatment, the need for employment training. Incarceration by itself, without good programs, will only result in violent, drug-addicted people with poor employment histories going back on the street. The Correctional Service of Canada takes these issues extremely seriously. There's lots of research, there's plenty of facts about criminal justice that you've been studying here at Carleton. Why do we ignore them in developing programs and practice? During my time at the Correctional Service of Canada and my continuing association with American Corrections, I puzzled why, in the light of excellent Canadian and American research, legislators and the public are so reluctant to fund programs that work. Why so often the lock them up and throw away the key philosophy seem to prevail? Why is legislation based on emotional reaction to events rather than the sound research that you studied here at Carleton? Just recently, I learned why. After all these years, I learned the reason from Dan Gardner, a columnist in the Ottawa Citizen, during a presentation that he made here in Carleton last winter. Dan, in his new book, explains how we, as a species, we humans as a species, are hardwired to respond to stories rather than facts. For many thousands of years, we learned as hunter-gatherers, sitting around the fire, listening to our elders telling stories designed to help us survive. We are hardwired to learn from stories. We listen to our gut rather than our head. Thus, criminal justice policies are more likely to be influenced by the stories bandied about in bars and in the media rather than by reports by the researchers here at Carleton. Think this is far-fetched? Here's a quote from a speech by our Prime Minister to the Conservative Party on January 28, 2008, this year, and I quote, "Canadians feel less safe than they once did. They rightly worry about the security of their neighborhoods. Some try to pacify Canadians with statistics to assure that no matter what they experience, it can't really be happening. But Canadians know there is a problem." End of quote. As Dan Gardner says, Mr. Harper in this statement implicitly acknowledges that his claims about crime are not supported by data. But that doesn't matter. What matters is subjective perception. Rational inquiry is not the best way to discover the truth. Feeling is. It's not easy for governments to make criminal justice decisions based on hard research when they are elected by and led by those who are more influenced by stories. Our criminal justice system is built on emotional reaction to stories rather than on facts-based data. It's gut versus brain. Now, after all these years, I understand why. Today, you're graduating from a university that's famous for its research in the field of criminal justice. My plea to you is to rely on research-based data, not stories, not emotion, to influence you in the design of the Canadian criminal justice system. Crime rates are at their lowest in 25 years. Yet legislation like the Violent Crime Act, currently going through the House, keeps prescribing prison as a magic potion. Whether you are directly involved in the criminal justice system or working elsewhere as Canadian citizens, please address and advocate criminal justice issues as informed and educated Canadians. Use your head, please, rather than your emotions. When your children sit here on their graduation day, let there be in Canada a research-based criminal justice system that you have influenced, a system that makes both you and your children proud to be Canadians. Thank you very much.